So today we'll learn about query by example. So before we start, let's have some idea what is query by example. So it is a querying technique that does not require you to write classical queries to include entities and properties. Usually what we do when we have a Spring Boot application, so in that Spring Boot application we write so many queries in the repository, right? Those are basically classical queries, right? So whether it is a native query or query method, we are just writing few queries, right? But this is completely different. Okay. So what it is, it allows dynamic query creation and consists of three pieces: a probe, example measure, and an example. So this query would not be created before you use it. On the fly, it would be created, right? So you will write the code with the query, okay, and you will be executing it, right? And this query has three pieces: probe, example measure, and an example. So we'll see an example: what is probe, what is example measure, and what is an example. Okay. So before that, what we have to know what is probe. Probe is a domain object with already set properties. So basically, whatever the domain you are using, whether it is student, user, employee, so these are the domain, and probe is exactly the domain having set of properties. Okay, and whatever the property we need to set in the probe. Okay, when we'll see the example, we'll get to know what exactly probe. And an example matcher provides the rule for matching particular properties. So while writing queries, we have so many conditions, right? We're putting so many this where this should be this should be that, like this. So that kind of condition we input it inside the example measure. And after that, we have the example, put the probe and the example measure together and generate the query. So this is what actually query by example. So I have created a simple Spring Boot application. Okay. If you see it, query by example. So I will just show you my pom.xml file which I created for this example. So I have added Lombok and these things, SpringData. These are the common basic properties. I mean dependency I have added. MySQL connector and Spring Boot starter since it is a Spring Boot application. They're very basic. And if I would go to resources and properties, the very basic things I have added like URL, username, password. These are optional to trace the log actually. Okay. So I will close this one. We will go through the example first. We'll see what exactly happening. So we will close this one. Okay. Now this is the domain actually, the entity upon which I will run few examples, right? This user entity has four properties: ID, name, email, city. Okay, I have added Lombok data so that the getter and setter would be created on the fly. Okay, so that's all. So I have created the repository, but that is of no use here since we'll be writing query by example, right? So let's open this application. This is a Spring Boot application. I have this runner. Inside this, I will be executing all my logic. Okay, so what I created is I have created a user object. Okay, if you see here, it is a probe one. I named it as probe one, and probe one I have set it name as Alice. Okay, name is Alice, and after that I created an example. Okay, after that user repository find all example one. Okay, we need the user repository. If you see, unless we create the user repository, it won't work. So that is mandatory. Okay, user repository we need. So we'll run this application, right? So if you see here what I said here, where is the document? This is the document. If you see here, maximize three parts, right? Probe, example measure, and example. If you see here, we have only two things here, right? We have probe is there, example is there, but there is no example measure, right? So in this query we just have used these two things, right? I will show how to use the example measure as well, but for now if you see probe, we have set the properties, which properties we need. So this query will find all the user with name ls, right? So let's run this application. Okay, so it has printed This one, this particular object it has printed, right? I'll go back. So I have printed the whole thing I have printed. Okay. So in the database, if you see, I already have inserted 3 users. Okay. So this one it has printed, right? Now we'll see the next. We'll see with the query example, right? So this one, the example measure. We'll see the example measure how to use this one. Yes. So this is with probe, example measure, and example. Okay, I will comment it out the first one so that we can verify the output of the second one. Okay. So what we did here, we created a new probe, and this time we set it name as AL. Okay, set name AL, and city we have set it as Boston. Okay. So we'll ignore. So we can have certain properties. I mean the rules what we can provide. We have ignored few properties like ID. So we do not need ID, so we just ignored it. What we matched with major name and city, and the name should start with AL, okay, and city should exactly match with Boston. Well, this is the rule what we provided here. After that, we'll put the probe, okay. If you see probe and measure together, created an example, and this example we have passed to find all our matched statements, right? So we'll do one thing. We'll go to the document again just to review it. So probe is there, example measure is there, example is there. So we'll review it again. We created probe, we created measure, and we put probe and match together to create an example. After that example, we passed inside the query so that we'll fetch all the records that is matched with particular condition. So let's run this one. Okay. So we find it. Name start with AL that we have given, and the city should be Boston, right? Exactly, we found the same record what we are expecting, right? So this is very simple of writing. So there is another example I have created just to so that we can have pagination with the query by example as well, right? This similar thing will write probe, example measure, and example. With that, we can have the pagination as well. So for that, I have written this one. So what I said is this Alice and Boston, whatever there it before, the same I have written here. There is no difference. Only I have included this one. I have included the pagination, right? Here I have created this one for pagination and we'll pass it while fetching the query, right? So we need to, that's, I mean, usually we pass this pageable inside the query, right? Whenever we write inside the repository. So similarly, we have to pass. The only difference is how we are creating the query. So in traditional manner, we used to create all the queries inside user repository, but here it is not the case. So here, whatever we want to have the query, we're just creating by providing an example, right? We just create an example and we pass it and we're asking the database to fetch all the records that is matching with this example, right? So that's what we are doing. So let's run this application. We'll comment the previous one so that we can verify. If you see page and apply, total elements 1, total pages 1, current page. Since the page starts with index 0, right? So this page is 0 and it has written the exactly the record which is matched. So that is all about this query by example. I will remove all the commented section from here so that you can run this query on yourself. I will, I this one I have committed to the Git repository. You can download it as well. So 3 examples I have given, and the document I have attached here. Few more things I have added, like it only supports starting, ending, containing, regex, matching. So you can explore this thing, and I have provided the create user query, table query. So basically, you can create and insert, and you can run this whole example. So that is all about query by example. It is not very complex, very simple. So one thing I just noticed where to use this query by examples, right? Suppose think about it. You have created this query, no doubt, but it cannot be reusable, right? Suppose you create inside a user repository. If you write query, so many queries, if you write it, you can reuse it later. But here, whenever you are writing, it is gathered in one place, right? In one place, and for particular logic, you can write it. Okay. If you want to it reusable, then you can put it inside the user repository the way we were writing the traditional queries, right? Whether it is native query or query method, right? So that is one thing keep in mind. So that is all about query by example. Thank you.